Circle Y lecture series. The purpose of these presentations is to bring timely topics focusing on social justice issues of interest in the Whitewater community. We hope you leave this presentation, Ending the Genocide, towards a shared future for Palestinians and Jews, not only better informed on the historical and current struggles, but also of some of the organizations working for healing and justice in Israel and Palestine. As you enter, you should have received a card to write questions you may have. During the presentation, please pass the question cards to our ushers stationed around the sanctuary. You met several of them as readers when you came in, so they'll collect the cards throughout. At the end of the presentation, our guests will be glad to answer as many of those questions as time allows. We have Lynn Benny, who will facilitate the question and answer period. In appreciation of the time and effort for our guests that are here today, we also have some baskets in the back and on the sides, so if you want to leave a little donation, those donations will go as appreciation to our speakers. And donation will be divided between the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition and the Jewish Voice for Peace. That's what will happen to the donations. Finally, at the end of the program, we will have a fellowship. The exit in the elevator is over here, and there's other exits in the back, and we'll have fellowship downstairs, and you can meet the presenters personally. Our presentation will be recorded for WisconsinWise.com, as well as for our own First United Methodist Church YouTube channel. And now I am honored to introduce our presenters. Janan Najeeb is a Palestinian American Muslim who founded the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition in 1994. A well-known tireless justice advocate, Najeeb is a noted go-to resource for media, academic institutions, and interfaith organizations. Dr. Rachel Buck is chair of the History Department at UW-Milwaukee and a founding member of the Milwaukee Jewish Voice for Peace. Najeeb is the convener of the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine, which includes more than 600 organizations, of which Dr. Buck is the co-chair and is executive of the executive committee. And now, please heartily welcome our two speakers.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is, as was mentioned, my name is Janan Najeeb, and I am Palestinian. I have lived in Milwaukee most of my life, but I was born in Jerusalem. Although I'm a first generation, in some ways, I'm also a third generation because my grandfather used to come to Milwaukee, of all places, among other cities, as a merchant from Palestine, and one of his stops was Milwaukee. And he brought my father here when he was 15 years old, and then when my father was 16, his father passed away. He brought him here to learn the trade and to go to school, finish high school and finish college. But then he passed away and is buried in Milwaukee in Pine Lawn Cemetery. My father remained here. He finished high school, he went to college. He served in the US Army. Then he went overseas back to Palestine, got married. I was born. One of my brothers was born there. And in 1966, they decided, I was just a couple of years old and my brother was a year younger than myself, and they decided they were going to come here to visit and to kind of spend some time here and my father had fond feelings for Milwaukee because he spent so many years here. The '67 war broke out, and Palestinians that were outside of the country were not allowed in. And so we remained. What is really interesting is that my father passed away 6 years ago. He had finally been able, as an American citizen, an older American citizen, to be able to go back to visit as a tourist, not as a Palestinian who had, this was his homeland. But he passed away there, and he's buried there in his homeland. So my grandfather is buried in Milwaukee, but my father is buried there. My four siblings, myself and my three siblings, live in the greater Milwaukee area, and we all have families. We have families here. You know, I'm going to let Rachel also introduce herself, but I want to just say a few things before we kind of get started. Growing up, I always heard the phrases that Palestine was a land without a people or a people without a land. Nothing could be further from the truth. We also always heard that if it wasn't for the European Jews that came as a colonialist entity in Palestine, that we would still be living in a desert because it was these European Jews that made the desert bloom. And nothing could be further from the truth, because the Palestinians have been there for centuries and centuries. Jesus is Palestinian. He is not Israeli. And Palestine has always been known for its rich agriculture. It's, you know, my parents not only owned homes in the West Bank, but they also had a summer home that they had in Jericho. Winter home, I'm sorry, because Jericho is actually quite hot. And you can see the, what is it called, the Mountain of Mercy? It's the mountain of that Jesus fasted 40 days and stayed. And you could see it from that home. In Jericho, there were oranges and there were bananas. And in the West Bank, grapes and olive trees. There were plums and vegetables and herbs and so many different things that were sent out to big surrounding countries, because Palestine is part of what was known as the Fertile Crescent. So it's important to note what we have been fed for so long to justify the 76 years of occupation and oppression that the Palestinians have endured. And at the end of the day, Palestine and the Palestinian people have suffered tremendously from what we see to be nothing more than a colonialist settler, racist colonialist settler state that was created by Europeans because they wanted to have a resolution to what they saw as their Jewish problem. So rather than finding safety and security for Polish Jews and French Jews and Russian Jews and others in their homelands, they decided that they were going to find another homeland. And many people don't realize that when the search for a Jewish homeland began, it was not always Palestine. They reviewed several countries in Africa as potential homelands. They reviewed homelands in South America as potential homelands before deciding that Palestine would be a good place for the Jews because there were already some Palestinian Jews, although they were only 2% of the population, but there were some Palestinian Jews there, and there were some religious sites for Jews as well. But as is always the case with colonialism and these types of established colonies, they never ask the indigenous people what they think about being displaced and being ethnically cleansed to make room for these European entities. So when we later on talk about present day, what is happening and what is going on, we can't ignore the fact of how it started. History did not start on October 7th. History started actually before, 76 years ago when Israel was created. It started with the Balfour Declaration. It started with basically Britain, along with the World Zionist Congress, deciding that they wanted to have a homeland, a European homeland for Jews, and it was established on the destruction and death of 500 Palestinian villages and cities that were completely demolished and removed from the face of the earth. And it was, this was established over the dead bodies of tens of thousands of Palestinians, and in fact, 750,000 Palestinian refugees that now them and their descendants going on third generation remain in different Arab countries and in the diaspora, including Gaza. Many of the people in Gaza are not specific to Gaza, but they are part of those that have been ethnically cleansed to make room for the European Jews. So that's my kind of introduction, and we'll let Rachel give her introduction, and we decided, although we did put a PowerPoint together, we're not sure how we're going to get that going, but I think that we have enough material to be able to kind of share in discussion.
I told Janan this morning that it's like a bad joke. Like a Jew and a Muslim are going to give a presentation at a church, and their technology needs them. And that's not really the joke. I had to work on it, but we did not get things to go. So I'm Rachel Ida. As was said, I'm right now the chair of the history department at UW-M, and I'm an immigration historian. I'm also a founding member of the chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace in Milwaukee, which was founded in 2014. And just thinking about some of the things Janan just said, coming from the background that I come from, which I'll elaborate in a second, the most unholy thing I can imagine is to bomb a refugee camp. I didn't think I could be that shocked getting into November and December of this year with the successive bombings, yes, of hospitals, yes, of schools, but because of Jewish history and because of my intellectual commitments, refugees are unquestionably people who deserve shelter. So, among many other things, in the past 6.5 months, that has completely reoriented my thinking about a lot of things. And I wanted to react to another thing you said, Janan, that I've heard you speak about your family before, and it strikes me like our stories, and this is often true with Jews and Palestinians, our stories are so similar. Right, my father's family were peddlers. That's how they came to this country, and they wound up in West Virginia, and they were itinerant tailors, and they settled down and figured out a way to become American. And I think that our stories in that way, immigrant stories in general, but particularly I think Jewish and Palestinian stories can be very similar. And this is something we'll get into a little later, but there's a beautiful, long, anti-Zionist Jewish tradition that most of my kids and their contemporaries are now trying to reclaim, that I in my life have tried to reclaim, that we have lost. That was part of the price of the ticket for Jews coming to be considered white people and Americans. We kind of threw in with the United States investment in the state of Israel after 1948, which of course is mostly a strategic and military concern. It gets spoken of as ensuring the safety of Jews. I can talk more about that. So I grew up in a Zionist, liberal Zionist household. My parents were both here during World War II, but a very difficult period for American Jews because we knew, not in great detail, but we knew what was happening in Europe, and we knew that there had been boatloads of people, like on the St. Louis, trying to get out of Europe, who had been turned back by the United States, by many nations in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba welcomed a few. My parents grew up knowing this, right, that they were safe for now, because nobody knew how the war was going to turn out, and that relatives were not at all safe, and that Jews were not at all safe. That is something that every Jewish person grows up knowing, that we are not safe in this world. That's our history. And so they raised me to think that, and this is very, very much their generation of Jews, my parents are in their 80s and 90s now, that because of the cruelties and difficulties of Jewish history, Jews needed to have a place that we could always go. I call it the break glass in case of emergency Zionism. That we always have this special place that we don't, that our government funds magnificently, but that it's so we can go there if we need to. It's obviously a little more complicated than this. So as a pretty young kid, I knew that there was something, it was a period of civil rights. I grew up in the 70s. I knew there was something a little contradictory and yucky about this, and I got in trouble in religious school. Me and the rabbi's son, they gave us some reading to do about Israel, and me and the rabbi's son, so I'm saying like the big guy, right, came in and we were like, kind of seems like the Arabs, because you didn't talk about Palestinians, then you talk about the Arabs. The Arabs have a point, and our teacher was like, no. And then we moved on. That's a really bad thing to do to a kid, right? Like, you're like, oh, I have even more questions, because the grown-ups start talking, right? I always kind of knew that something was wrong, and I also knew, as I came of age as a progressive activist around mostly immigration and other civil rights issues, I also knew from experience that with the organized Jewish community in this country, which is predominantly and increasingly vociferously Zionist, that if you took any position criticizing Israel, there would be retribution. So I would say for much of my life, I was pretty out front and brave and progressive and very careful about Israel, though I increasingly knew that it was wrong. So for me, in 2014, when Israel did what it calls mowing the grass, which is to strike down the lives of generations of activists so they won't make trouble in Operation Protective Edge against the kind of increasing demands of Palestinian youth, particularly for freedom. At the same time, my professional organization, the American Studies Association, began to consider the question of entering into an academic boycott of Israel. So, I have a PhD, so one thing I'm good at is doing my homework. So I did a lot of homework and really thought about this and really decided that it was time to move into a position of, wasn't even anti-Zionism then, but of condemning occupation protective edge, of condemning what the state of Israel does every single day in my name. But that was unacceptable to me, that I couldn't live with that anymore. At the time, my kids were in grade and middle school. My older daughter was getting ready for bat mitzvah. And so I took a job to cut the costs of religious education as teaching Sunday school. And I teach for a living. I love to teach. I come alive in the classroom. And as my mind started to be open to the amazing history that I was always very careful. My parents were afraid of Palestinians. In 1975, the UN voted that Zionism was racism, and my community's response was to feel hurt. So I never had a kafiyeh until I was in my 50s, because I thought it was not for me, and it took me a long time to understand, to listen, to know enough Palestinian people to know that it's actually an ask from Palestinian people to wear a keffiyeh as an act of solidarity, which I wear very proudly and every day. I probably should have watched this first, but it's been that kind of week. So I started really knowing Palestinian people, coming into relations, reading, thinking, my mind opened, my world opened, and so I started talking to my 4th grade class about what I was learning, just a little bit, and what Janan said just now about Israel literally being built on the wreckage of Palestinian lives and villages and homes. There's a really wonderful Jewish Voice for Peace supported project called the Nakba Education Project, which you can Google it and find it in one hit, the Nakba Education Project. One of the things they do is just show places in Israel, like what they look like now, pictures of what they used to look like, and sort of compare and contrast. And I thought, well, this would be a really fun lesson for my 4th graders because they have not been told any of this. And if you've ever been around children, they have a pretty sensitive, just like me with the Sunday school teacher shutting me and the rabbi's son down, that like created a big dent in my brain, but it's still there, like something's wrong. Kids really like to hear secrets. So one class, I showed them some pictures from the Nakba Project, and I said, here's a Jewish National Front park in Israel, and here's some Israeli families having a picnic, and here's some monuments, some like little things that are monuments to the Romans. And here's somebody who came along and said, did you know that there was a village here? And then there's a little film strip in the Nakba Project, people reacting. Some people are like, oh, I didn't know that. And other people are like, I don't care about the Palestinians, I'm just here with my family. And my students were like, why? 8-year-olds. They were just like, wow, we've never heard of this. We want to know more. Like, this is to me a great day in the classroom. The head of the religious school called me on Monday and said, we've been looking and there's no room for you in the school anymore. And I said, let me get this straight. You have somebody, like most religious school teachers, no shade at all, don't have PhDs and teach history every day. I'm like, you're doing pretty well. You're paying me like whatever, $200 a month, and I'm pretty good in the classroom and the students like me. They were like, it's just an administrative matter. You cannot speak the truth in these communities. I have much more to say, but we were just introducing yourselves.
So we are, of course, in a church, and I thought that it would be valuable to discuss some of the things that I've learned from many of the Christians that I work with. If you are not familiar with the Wisconsin Christians for Justice in Palestine, I would encourage you to do that, have your congregation join. We're talking about quite a number of clergy that have come out in statements in support of the Palestinian Christians, but also because they don't believe that that as Christians they should remain silent. Silence is really complicity. And so I had a discussion with one of the reverends who I hope you guys will consider inviting sometime, and she said, although I have a liberal congregation, I want you to know that we grew up with really the Zionist narrative, even in our Christian education. And we were kind of taught that if we, are to hold Israel accountable or say anything about Jews, that somehow that's anti-Semitic and that's not something that as Christians we should do. And so what has become clear in this country, and particularly even amongst churches, is the fear of holding Israel and their oppression accountable because of the fear of being labeled anti-Semitic. So that's a term that has now been thrown left and right and is being used as a silencing tactic. And we need to push back against that. We need to fight against that. One of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about and to address is that within the Christian kind of establishments, you hear oftentimes what the Jewish community, the kind of establishment Jewish entities will say, well, this is our biblical home. So what is a biblical home? What exactly is a biblical home? Something that, you believe that thousands of years ago, because you lived there, so now, nothing has changed. History hasn't changed. There hasn't been, different empires that have come and invaded and gone and intermarried and movement. And it's a total kind of, I say, a 4-year-old history. To think that this is a biblical home, ignoring what has happened thousands and thousands of years in that land. Furthermore, what is that saying about God? And we had a discussion, Rachel and I, and she can elaborate more, that there are many Christians, and there are in fact Jews, that believe that when the children of Israel, or Israel in the context of the Bible is talked about, that somehow that must mean this modern state that was created 76 years ago. When you talk about Israel in the Bible, or even in the Quran has children of Israel. We're talking about the children of Jacob. We're talking about a people. We're talking about a group of people. We're not talking about a modern state. And God doesn't promise plots of land because God is not a racist real estate broker. He does not promise plots of land based on ethnicity and ignoring piety. As a Jew, and Rachel will tell you this, as a Jew, you can be an agnostic, you could be an atheist, you can be a convert. And you can go to Israel, no problem. You can take over the home of a Palestinian family who gets kicked out because this is your promised land that God has promised you.
Can I just say one thing about this?
Yeah?
So in our liturgy, my beloved younger daughter, when she was studying for bat mitzvah, fast forward, we had to leave the temple I got fired from, found a really wonderful non-Zionist, now anti-Zionist congregation led by the wonderful Brant Rosen in Chicago. So she was studying with Brant for her bat mitzvah, and she said, so we don't like the state of Israel. We don't think it's justified, right? And I was like, yeah, that's right. She was like, so what's all this? Our most sacred prayer, the Shema, starts, Hear, O Israel. And Brent said, well, Israel for Jewish people is basically like saying Yah, like the people of Israel. It's our peoplehood. It is not a document written by a racist real estate agent. It's by saying, like, we are, because Jews, our history is diasporic. We've been spread out for generations. And so we recognize each other by culture and language and things. And so, a people who doesn't have a homeland needs like kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod, Yah, or Israel, right? That's what it means in the Torah. Because the Torah is written well before 1948. It absolutely doesn't. So just to support that, because my 13-year-old was confused. She was like, well, we don't believe that the state of Israel should be a state for the Jews. It should be an ethno-nationalist state. She didn't say that. She's smart, but she's not like that. But it's a peoplehood. We are a people. And if you think about it, and I'll turn it back over to you in a second, Janan, one of the things that plagues the world right now is the idea that there should be one kind of people in a country, right? If you think about the guy who was president who wants to be president again, a lot of what he said is like, this belongs to us, not you. That is a condensation of the Republican platform for 2004, essentially. Like, this is our country, not yours, where yours is everybody else, refugees, asylum seekers, anybody else who is already here, who looks funny or sounds funny, or, but that's not a Jewish value. Ethno-nationalism is not a Jewish value. Jewish peoplehood is a Jewish value. And now back to you.
Yeah, and thank you for that, and I think that's, you know, that's really important. So how does that play out in our day-to-day lives? My parents and myself were born, you know, my brother, we were born in Palestine, but we can't have Palestinian citizenship. We cannot, the only time we have been now able to go there is as American tourists. And when we go there, because it's clear that where we were born, we are automatically sent to a separate line. And we drive cars or taxis, and all of the cars of the Palestinians have a different colored license plate. What is that reminiscent of? So we are identified immediately. We have different roads that are unpaved. So as a Palestinian, I just want to share with you a few experiences that I had. If you've ever had to go through the checkpoints, and the Jews don't have to go through the checkpoints, the Palestinians do. In Palestine, the Israelis have established 700 checkpoints on Palestinian land. Not in the part that they're governing, in the part that's supposed to be governed by the Palestinians. And who are controlling the checkpoints? The Israelis. And I went through those checkpoints. My children went through those checkpoints. We have these 19-year-old soldiers, you know, there'll be a dozen of them holding guns at you. And imagine this is the everyday reality of kids trying to get to school, of individuals trying to get to work, trying to get to hospitals. One of my aunts died at a checkpoint, coming back over and over, trying to get through for dialysis. And these young soldiers think it's a joke. Go back, today's not your day, we're not feeling it. Go back. She came back 13 days straight. Eventually she died. This is the reality of Palestinians. Imagine a woman trying to give birth and trying to get to the hospital. What if she needs a C-section? So many mothers and so many babies have died trying to get through those checkpoints. What is our reality with the settlers? You know, they're giving this kind of romantic name, settlers, like you think, just sort of like the name that we gave to those that ethnically cleanse the native tribes. You know, they're settlers. There's nothing there. They're settlers. These are some of the most vicious and depraved and racist individuals. Many of them are American, they're European, they're Russian. They're all from outside the country. And they have established these huge cities. They're not settlements, they're cities in the West Bank. And we're going to still try and share this PowerPoint we have because I think it's important for you to see the loss of land, the Palestinian land, how little land is left for the Palestinians to live in, because every time these settlements are created, and there are hundreds of them in the West Bank, and they're huge cities. They have their own roads, they have their own entrances. So they take so much of the Palestinian land in order to make sure that these become facts on the ground. Because the idea of a two-state solution has never been the plan of Israel. Their plan has always been to take the entire land of Palestine, including Gaza, and keep all of that land for themselves, and for the Palestinians to be either ethnically cleansed or to be transferred to other countries and other places. I was in Palestine, I was in the West Bank, I was in Al-Wira, which is where the Palestinian Authority headquarters is. So that's like kind of your Washington, D.C. And the settlers would come in, backed up by army tanks, And they would shoot at, because the Palestinians have way less water allocation. The Israelis and even the settlers have tons of water that is siphoned off to them to be able to have green grass, to be able to have swimming pools. And the Palestinians are very limited, even in the West Bank. We're not talking about Gaza, where it's been for decades very, very limited water allocation for each one. We're talking about the West Bank itself. And so what the Palestinians have done, they have these kind of big cisterns, everyone on the top of their houses, in order to try to collect rainwater and to use this water to be able to wash their clothes and things like that. And they think it's really funny to come in with their weapons and to shoot holes in all of these on the tops of houses. So all of the water kind of comes out. If a young boy is seen walking by themselves, he's shot dead. And then they'll say, oh, he threw stones at us. This is our daily reality. This is not something that has happened, 6 months ago. This has been our daily reality for 76 years under Israel. So when we talk about what's happening in Gaza right now, Rachel alluded to the idea of the Israeli policy of mowing the grass. Israel has invaded Gaza itself 15 times in the last 17 years. Each time, including the very brutal 2014 campaign, each time killing thousands, because they say, well, they have children, and they need to continue to remain within that concentration camp in Gaza. And so they come in and they kill, particularly women and children, in order to prevent the next generation. So what is happening, what has been happening most recently is not just the complete destruction, the unprecedented destruction, but we have seen that 76% of those who have been killed and massacred, and they don't like the word genocide, use a word you like. If massacred sounds better, if killed sounds better, if life snuffed out sounds better, if blown to pieces sounds better, use what you want. But we believe it's a genocide, and the majority of the world believes it's a genocide, because when you are trying to prevent the continuation of a particular group of people, that is a genocide. And the intentional targeting of women and children is a genocide. And just several weeks ago, they went into the bank that has for families that have had difficulties having children, and there are thousands of the fertilized embryos, and they destroyed all of that, because the intention is to get rid of an entire people. That's what we're seeing in Gaza right now. We're seeing the death and destruction of all of their academics, and I think Rachel can talk a bit of the scholasticide that we've been talking about. They have targeted journalists, they have targeted teachers, they have targeted universities, they have targeted care workers, the UN care workers. They have targeted all of these groups of people in order to leave the Palestinians leaderless. And I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, but I want to tell you about one story, about an individual whose family was in West Virginia when my husband was doing his fellowship as a physician. Beautiful family. Dr. Chabert, who was finishing his training in medical field, and they had 7 children. The youngest was born here in the United States, and he rose to become the president of one of the universities, and all the universities have been destroyed in Gaza, every single one of them, besides every hospital. And so they bombed his home, and they know exactly who they're bombing. They bombed his home, and there were the kids that I remember years ago. They were kids, beautiful kids that had become adults and had families and had their own children. All of them were sheltering in their dad's home because they thought it was a safe place. And it was these 2,000-pound bombs not only killed that household, but everything around it. Amazingly, Dr. Chabert and his wife seem to have been close to the door. Who knows, were they looking outside, what was going on? But they managed to run outside, where snipers were set up and shot them in their front yard. They left them for 3 weeks to rot. Anyone that tried to get close to them to bury their bodies in a dignified way was shot. For 3 weeks, hungry animals ate their bodies, they decomposed, and the idea was to make them a lesson amongst all the other professors. There have been so many professors and the heads of so many universities that have been intentionally targeted, to make them a lesson to the Palestinians that you will be leaderless, you people are nothing. The only person that remains of that family that we once knew in West Virginia, this beautiful family, and I still have images of Dr. Chabert putting his youngest daughters on his lap. He loved his daughters especially. And they were, you know, he would run around with them, he would do things with them. The only person that remained is the youngest, who happened to get married and is living in Chicago. She's the only remaining survivor of that entire family. This is the daily reality of Palestinians. You know, we only heard about Gaza, we only heard about the killings when Israelis were killed. But this is the daily reality of Palestinians for 76 years. But unfortunately, we live in a society that has basically said indigenous people, people of color, don't count. The only lives that seem to count are those who identify as coming from European backgrounds. So I just want to share that and just, you know, let Rachel follow up with the whole Scholasticide activity.
So we do this kind of work all the time, but it's really heavy. So maybe just take a breath, because the stories you're hearing are, you know, the stories about our fellow humans are pretty hard to live with. So I just want to give you the space to internalize some of that last story, and these are so common. So I'll just say that I was at a benefit early on, maybe November. I didn't think that we would still be talking about the genocide continuing in April. I didn't imagine that it would still continue. Although Rabbi Rosen pointed out when he came to speak in December, given the story we've already told you, he can show it if you put it on here. So he could show the thing if you put it on here. The thing Rabbi Rosen said that really struck me as true and very damning. The United States tried its damnedest to disappear the indigenous folks here, and the ones that remain, and there are many that remain, miraculously survived in spite of that. You know, and the same is true, and why, you know, it seems mad. Right, and you can sort of say, well, Netanyahu is such an extremist, he's such an idiot, he's trying to stay out of jail, all the things you can say about Netanyahu. But what Brian said that really stayed with me is like, this was always the end of having an ethno-state of Israel. That the founding of that state, the displacement during the Nakba, that was the end, what the end game was always going to be complete eradication. And there already are being whispered about plans for the post-Palestinian development of Gaza as beachfront for Israel. These are profane things to hear. These are very difficult things to hear. But I think that it's true that if you're going to have a state predicated on dispossession and exclusion, genocide and erasure, eradication, kind of come with the territory. And so Janan had asked me to address scholasticide a little bit. You know, it's hard this is a very hard period, right? It's hard to read the news every day. And I have to look for the news because unless you watch Al Jazeera or Democracy Now!, there really isn't very good coverage of what's happening in Gaza or what's happening in the West Bank. But if you look and you listen, it's very difficult to attend what's going on. It's painful. It's not uncommon for me in being amongst Palestinian Americans to talk casually with somebody. I was at a benefit in December, a music benefit, and was talking to this young woman who said she knew of me. And we were chatting, and I said, "How are you today?" And she said, "Well, you know, 50 people in my family died today, so I'm not doing all that well." This is not uncommon, I've come to understand. It's not uncommon that the folks who are here, the Palestinian Americans who, like Janan, are part of bigger diasporic families. Some people are overseas, some people are in Europe, some people are in Palestine. It's not uncommon for them to have lost unimaginable numbers of people in their families. And that's just a daily reality. We have several people in the coalition with these stories. Along with that has gone the deliberate targeting, as Janan was saying, of journalists, professors, aid workers, doctors. It's important to say that this genocide is unique. Unfortunately, it's not unique in being a genocide. We seem to do that in human history. But it's unique in that it is an AI-generated genocide. So Operation Lavender feeds, and this is what the Google workers, I don't know if you saw it last week, there were a number of Google workers arrested in California and New York for protesting no tech for genocide. When Israeli drones attack a hospital, they know who's in the beds, right? When they attack a house, they know where the bedrooms are. This has all been mapped, right? So everything that has happened has been intentional. And let me say, because the vexed issue of Hamas is often raised, Hamas is a political party. Hamas won an election, won a couple of elections in Gaza. There's a history there about the undermining of the power and ability of the Palestinian Authority. There's a history of Israel creating Hamas to play off other factions, the more powerful factions in Palestinian life. There is, in other words, a complicated political history to Hamas. And yes, Gaza's ruling authority has been Hamas. When you go to the polls in November, which I would hope you do, I don't imagine that you're thinking that if somebody's angry at Biden, they might take you out if you vote for them, or angry at Trump. Let's not talk about that. Let's just My point is that the excuse that, well, they are all Hamas is frankly untrue and disingenuous. In any case, the destruction of Palestinian places of knowledge, the destruction of archives, so this history cannot be written because the archives have been incinerated. This is very familiar to me as a Jewish person. It means there can be no history of this people. And it connects with what we see happening in places like Columbia University, where students, young people who are standing up for Palestine, Palestinians, Jews, Christians, atheists, are increasingly being targeted as the enemy, where people who speak the truth now are being targeted as the enemy because it's not okay anymore to tell both sides of the story. In Palestine, we have the physical destruction of the archives. In this country, we have incredible repression on college campuses in the name of free speech. So you have to be very careful what you say about Palestine. On a college campus, we saw what happened at Columbia last week. The official definition of anti-Semitism that has now been adopted in Congress and by a lot of universities and been peddled around the world in countries like Germany, is that if you speak critically, as we are, of Israel, you are anti-Semitic. Ironically, this has resulted in things like the the New Yorker writer Masha Gessen herself, a Soviet, and she was born in the Soviet Union, a Jew. She lost a big literary prize because she was accused of anti-Semitism for writing the stories we're telling you now. You literally cannot speak the name of what you see. So this is a useful thing for non-Jewish, non-Muslim audiences, so I will say that it's very important that you understand that there is real anti-Semitism, right? In Charlottesville in 2017, people with pitchforks shouting, "Jews will not replace us," definite anti-Semites, make no mistake about it. I had to read up on that, I don't want to replace those people, what are we talking about? But this is an 18th century theory that Jews are conspiring to replace good Christians with Jews and our hapless agents, Palestinians and immigrants. We're always conspiring because we control things. That is anti-Semitism. When you have an assassin sneaking into the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh because he has ideas that, again, this is replacement theory, that HIAS, the Venerable Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which did work out at the Tree of Life synagogue, that HIAS, because it's helping immigrants, was again Jews trying to replace nice white people with scary immigrants. When he murdered people at prayer, definitely anti-Semitism. Me sitting here telling you that, to quote our mutual friend of blessed memory, Rose Statesman, Israel is ruining my ethical inheritance as a Jew, not anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism, yes, but it's not anti-Semitic. Let me just say this because I'm really proud to be a Jew. I'm religious. I keep the Sabbath. I'm a Jew. I'm really happy to be a Jew. I do not want a country representing me committing genocide. But, I try not to harp on this because other people have worse problems, but the 6 months of watching a country murdering women and children in the name of my safety has been incredibly traumatizing for me. And I don't accept it. And I don't accept that our government takes our tax money to the tune of $328 billion a year, beside of the appropriations that were voted on yesterday, and does not spend them on your kids and my kids, does not spend them on the unhoused people in our community, does not spend them on health care. It's so hard to get health care in this country. It's free in Israel because the United States government pays for that. None of that is okay with me. It is not anti-Semitic for me to say any of that, or for you to. It's not just because I'm a Jew and I can be I got a pass on myself. It is not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. But those two things have now been married, so that in our universities, and this is the connection with the scholastic side, you can't speak the truth about history without being accused of anti-Semitism. This has happened to prominent Palestinian scholars and teachers. It's happened to anti-Zionist Jewish scholars and teachers. So we have the destruction of the actual places of learning in Palestine and destruction of practices of learning here. In the name of, and I reject this entirely, protecting the Jewish people. We are a scholarly people. We are only a people because we are historically minded. Otherwise, we're spread out. Who even knows who we are? We intermarry. We disappear. We are only a people because of our practices of archive and history and memory and peoplehood. Those are now under siege for Palestinians, for Jews, for all people. They don't want you to know the story. They don't want you to see what happened at Al-Shifra Hospital, which is an abomination and no one should see it, but everyone should see it. Because now we know, not only did they murder doctors and lawyers and professors and poets and children and neonatal patients, they went after and targeted patients in hospitals. This is obscene, this is profane. This cannot stand, but it does.
And I think
that would help. Now, if you'd like to go through that quickly and allow a little bit.
That one is mine too, yours too.
actually it's all part of
Okay.
I have them together, so.
Should we click through them?
Just real quickly, I think that because we can definitely click through them, and I think what is important are some of the maps and things that we felt were important to show you, the loss of land that we discussed, and also, as Rachel was saying, we have no problem holding our government accountable. We have no problem cussing out our president, our senators, our elected officials. But if you say anything about Israel, that seems to be sacrilegious, and we need to stop that, you know? That needs to end. Even some of the terms, you know, we have Congress, as if they have nothing else to do, outlawing things like the Palestinian anthem, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You know, from the sea to the river, Palestine will live forever. This is, you know, as if that's something, as if even mentioning Palestine to try and basically silence people. So we need to fight against these things. But we wanted to highlight, is that?
So you have to click it back there?
Or is there a way to click it, or you will click it?
I'll click.
Okay,
Go
ahead.
Why don't we go through that quickly? I think we discussed most of it. Go ahead. And I think this is really just back to the idea that, you know, help him build Palestine, because Palestine was not built before, you know. So these are some of the things that had been presented about Jews building Palestine.
It's also important to say that nobody wanted the Jews who survived the Holocaust after the war. They were displaced persons, and Truman started pushing for Israel because he knew that Congress would not allow Jews to come here. There's a couple of very small displaced persons act, mostly non-Jews, because the world did not want Jews, and you said this before. So in a certain way, the founding of Israel is about anti-Semitism. Like, let's put them there. You know. Anyway, keep going. That was an important slide.
Yeah, we'll try to go.
Okay, keep going. We'll do Herzl one at a time. Keep that gelatin to me.
And feel free to share these with everyone. We have no problem with that, you know. So just the idea about this is a Nakba. You know, you have European Jews coming to Palestine, and the Palestinians are dispersed. Besides those that were killed and the villages that were removed, they basically had to walk all the way to Jordan. They had to walk for days through the mountains. My aunt was one of them. To Syria. And you have people now using the excuse that, well, you know, why doesn't Egypt take the Palestinians? Why don't the Arab countries? It's because they don't want them. No, they experience it. That's what Israel wants. They want to ethnically cleanse Palestine. The Palestinians don't want to leave Palestine. They want to remain in their own countries. So it's not that the Arab countries don't want them. There are millions of Palestinians in the Arab countries currently that live there. They were part of the first 1948 and 1967 displacement that took place.
Keep going.
Yeah, and these are just, you know, for decades and decades, the Palestinians have lived in refugee camps, mainly tents, and only more recently, some of them are now these really kind of shambled kind of places because they're left in certain areas.
Wait, can I slow you down here just for a second? So it's really important, because I had heard that for years and years before I really thought through it slowly, which is that babies are born, become children, go to school, grow up in those tents. It's not a temporary situation. When we think of refugees, we think, oh, we're going to stay in the tent a couple of years and then we got resettled. This is several generations of people, and this is what we want, what Israel wants, what our wants. Sorry.
Next. We'll just go through these. This is a picture of Palestine 1920. Now, mind you, Israel was established in 1948. And so, as you can see, Palestine was well established prior to 1948. So this is 1920 Palestine. Go ahead. Again, 1920 Palestine. These are some of the villages that have been eradicated. Go ahead. Keep going.
That's cool.
Yeah, because I know we're long on time. This is just a visual to be able to see the number of Jews that are brought in from Europe, the United States, elsewhere, and the displacement of Palestinians. Next. Here's an example also about the establishment of the settlements and others in Palestine. The blue are the settlements. Imagine how many they are currently. Next. And this is basically talking about, and again, you can feel free to share these slides. about the fact that, for example, if you are a Palestinian and you live, let's say, in Jerusalem and you want to get married to a Palestinian in the West Bank, you must leave Jerusalem and give up any contact with ever coming back to Jerusalem and go to the West Bank. Whereas a Jew can come in from anywhere in the world and live wherever they want, including in the West Bank. And so there are a lot of laws and a lot of rules that are very, very specific and very racist. And you find this right within they're very confident in highlighting it. Next. Here's an example, and this is such an important map. Mind you, the green, that was the Palestinian areas. The one next to it is after the partition, and you can see that the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem are all part of what the Britain and the Europeans, when they divided Palestine. And even then, the Jews were giving more of Palestine than the Palestinians. But going all the way then to what would be my right, your right here, you can see the green part. That's where the Palestinians currently are forced to live. Those are the only locations that Palestinians can now live. All the white area is controlled by Israel. And so what happens, what Israel does every so often is they will kill off some of the people in Gaza, and then as they clean out one of the villages, they will throw them into Gaza. And they will have to go into Gaza. And that's how within the span of 76 years, we went to that. That is all that remains, which brings us to kind of when we talk about a shared future. I personally do not believe a two-state solution is ever possible again. I believe our goal needs to be a single democratic state where every single person has an equal vote and everyone is equal to the other. We don't need a theocracy. We need to have everybody, Jews, Muslims, Christians, as equals.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, and if you say that to some Zionist circles, it's been very clear for a long time that the problem is demographics, and they'll say this. I was raised thinking this. So, well, if the Arabs were completely Arabs again, we're completely equal, there's more of them than us, and then Israel wouldn't be a Jewish state anymore. And I guess when I was younger, I didn't know how to ask this question, why do we need a Jewish state? Right? We're working on this in this country badly, but we're working on it. We share the road. We try to figure out how to have a place where people are equal, and it's been a difficult 200 plus years, we haven't done well at it, but it's a beautiful concept. Democracy. And I was raised to think that was too threatening to Jews. Think about that. People who escaped fascist totalitarianism to say oh, we gotta be careful about democracy because then they'll take over. But, the idea that a one state where we would all figure it out, and it would be difficult, and there would be historical distrust and mutual uncertainty, that's what we're doing here, right? That's what we're trying to do in this country. It's got its good parts and bad parts. It's saying that the only way Jews can be safe is if they wall off their country, discriminate against anyone who's not Jewish who lives there, take everything from the people, from our neighbors. When Janan was talking about water, I had heard that a lot before I sat with a lot of Palestinians and heard about our village gets one tank of water every 3 days, next door to the lush settlements Janan described. That's not a way. We're as a people, as a human people, we're moving away from that idea, hopefully, to the idea that we share, we figure it out. We have limited water. We have a climate crisis. We have to figure this stuff out, and we have to do it collectively. We have to do it collectively. It's not okay that Israelis have enough water. That's not going to really do it for the human race's survival. Sorry.
And we'll try to go quickly through this.
Okay, we'll try to go quickly.
Yeah, let's just keep going. Now, these are the settlers. These are the settlers, and you'll find that they are fully armed. After October 7th, our country sent more than 50 assault rifles to Israel, and they dispersed them amongst the settlers. Now you've got women walking around with assault rifles. You've got men walking around with assault rifle, all the Israelis. And if they feel in any way that they want to shoot someone, they have the right. There's no one holding them accountable. Next. Again, they go into the Palestinian areas. As you can see, all the Palestinians have closed their shops and they break the windows. This is a common occurrence. And they're like vicious, they're like wild. Next. Look at them in a Palestinian kind of, it's like a playground. I mean, why do these Israeli settlers need to be where the Palestinian kids come to try and have a little bit of relief? And as you can see, the Palestinians have all cleared out. Next. These are the Israeli settler women. I mean, to me, I found it kind of unconscionable. You're pushing a baby in a stroller, and at the same time, you're aiming at people and shooting at people. Next. These are just images that I think, heartbreaking images we have all seen of Gaza. The loss of life is one thing, and there are some estimates that believe when all said and done, and who knows when it's going to be all said and done, but just simply there's cholera taking places, there's famine taking, imposed famine, that we're talking about potentially having maybe 200,000 deaths. And this is, I want to just put it in context. Right now, just the deaths that are counted, those bodies that they actually have, not even those under the rubble, in terms of the population of Gaza, is akin to saying that every person in Wisconsin, in Illinois, and in Minnesota, every man, woman, and child has been murdered. How would that, just to put that in context. Next. Just the fear, more than half of the population of Gaza are children. What kind of mental health issues when now that it's been almost 190 days with no relief? 190 days. This is a concentration camp with nowhere to run, where we're providing 2,000-pound bombs, many of them that have banned substances. People are being burned to death. People are having just unbelievable, when you want to talk about napalm, this is like to the fourth power. Next. These are the men, and they take the men, and it was cold, and it's cold in Gaza, particularly in the evenings, and they've stripped them down. Many of them are experiencing torture. They're talking about waterboarding. They're talking about cutting off their fingers and cutting off their toes as ways of just torturing them. These are nurses. These are healthcare workers. These are teachers. These are not Hamas people even. These are just normal people, but it's a way of humiliating and really just devastating a population. Next. They're loading them off in trucks. Where on earth do we see these kind of images? And we're complicit. Our government is complicit in this. And thousands have been taken. So when we talk about I think it's 100 and some hostages that are left, what about the 8,000 missing Palestinian hostages that have been taken from Gaza alone? There's another 7,000 in the West Bank where Hamas doesn't even exist that have just been taken. These are all just within the last 6 months. And Israel is one of the only countries that also puts children, more than 1,000 children that are in military detention. Some as young as 7 and 8 years of age. Imagine. Next. We talk about the Palestinians as if they're all Muslims. What about the Christians that have died? What about the Christian churches that have been destroyed and massacred? This is one of the Eastern Orthodox, one of the oldest Orthodox churches in Gaza. And this is the destruction and death that has taken place. Next. This is the church. It has an image of what it looked like before and what it looked like after. Next. Next.
We can keep going.
Yeah,
we can talk about that.
I think we talked about a lot of this.
Yes,
Go ahead, keep going.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, and so, and that's, and please feel free to share the slides, the deadly exchange. You want to say something? We'd like to open for question and answer.
yeah, just quickly, the Deadly Exchange has been a JVP project because the thing about violence and militarism is that they circulate, right? So we give Israel $328 billion a year, mostly Lockheed Martin and Grumman and the usual suspects benefit from that. More guns in circulation. There's a lot of programs where U.S. police and ICE and other federal and local agents go to Israel to train. That's what we call the Deadly Exchange Program. And the idea is that, you know, their army is so efficient, their army is so great, we should learn more from them. So what we see is that these kind of militaristic strategies, this kind of violence proliferates and comes back home in things, as it always does.
Yeah, and something that we want to kind of, and we're very concerned with, and we want to, before we kind of open for Q&A, and something we want to give an alert to. Where do we think it's okay for citizens to go to a country, kill civilians, massacre women and children, and come back and live as normal citizens? We have thousands that have left to go fight in Israel, thousands from the United States, and they will be back on our turf. These are individuals that have a deep hatred for, you know, and there's no place where you just simply will hate Palestinians, that you are not going to also hate other people of color, or end up hating immigrants, or hating a certain group of people. These people are all going to be back here on our doorstep. And the fact that our government hasn't made any attempts to identify them, that they have not made any attempts, whereas other countries in the world are actually going to hold them accountable, is really problematic, because we know on college campuses, there have been cases where certain banned substances have been thrown and shot at demonstrators. We have in Milwaukee, we're having a press conference tomorrow at Marquette University, where we have a couple of these Jewish women that are hardcore, you know, some of them that have family members with the IDF, etc. When the Palestinian students and their supporters put up flags as a memorial for the dead individuals in Gaza in the middle of the campus. So you have to go onto the campus to the back. Several of these women came from off campus to vandalize, and one of them had a loaded weapon on her. So, you know, why would you bring a loaded weapon to Marquette University? So we're not done here. We're going to see the repercussions of this callous disregard for the lives of others coming back to the United States, and we're not sure what that's going to look like, unfortunately. So.
Just by contrast, if you think about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, just because they were Japanese Americans and we were at war with them, or the many, many Germans in Wisconsin, German Americans who were interned or arrested, the many churches that had leaders incarcerated during World War I and World War II because of the idea that they might be disloyal. You know, it's a real contrast. But we'll stop and hear your questions. Sorry, we've gone on a long time.
You guys didn't think you were going to be here all afternoon.
Well, I think there continues to be a great deal of interest in what you've been saying, as shocking as it is. What effect, if any, does the Shia-Sunni conflict have on what's happening?
That's a good question. As we know, Iran is Shia. The Houthis are Shia. The Hezbollah is in Lebanon are Shia. Hamas is not Shia. In fact, the Palestinians are one of the only countries that really don't have Shia members. But the Muslims are pretty much two sects. We're all Muslim. We believe in the same God. We read the same book, so it's not like even that there's a different, Quran or something like that. We have the same prophet, etc. This is a distinction that came about after the death of Prophet Muhammad, and it was really a political distinction as to who should take the rule of the caliphate or the Muslim people, kind of like the Muslim community at that time. Should it be the best friend of Prophet Muhammad, or should it be remain in the family? And the Shia, they're called Shiat Ali, or the party of Ali, because Ali was his cousin and also his son-in-law, believed that it should be really Ali that takes over. At the end, it didn't matter, because Abu Bakr, the best friend, was the first caliph, and the fourth was the cousin. But the way it's playing out here is that the United States and along with Israel, is trying to present this as almost, well, you know, Iran, a Shia, a sect, a different kind of group, is the one that is arming Hamas, and they're also arming Hezbollah. The problem is that Iran remains one of the only countries in the region that has not been demolished by the United States at the beckoning of Israel. The weapons of mass destruction and our, the neocons that were in power at the time, most of them were dual Israeli-American citizens at the time, the ones that really pushed for the war in Iraq. And Iran and Israel would like nothing more than to get U.S. soldiers in the U.S. embroiled in a war and to demolish Iran. Because then there's no, Syria is demolished, Libya is demolished, the Gulf have all of these non-representative dictators. And so it's really, Iran is the only one that they would also like to demolish and probably take over their oil and have control there. And so if you guys have watched how Israel has, along with the United States, have been trying to get Iran embroiled in a war, and Iran has really been trying to avoid it. Now suddenly Israel wants to go and has been, supposedly attacking Iran. Oh, because they control. Who declared war on Iran by going into Syria and killing 13 senior embassy staff at the Iranian embassy? But again, why does history only start when it's affecting a colonialist country or a European country? What about what happened before? That we are all out in the streets if Israel or the United States try to attack Iran, because it will be a nuclear war. That's what will happen. Iran is a huge country, and the only way to destroy Iran will be with nuclear weapons. It's something we're very fearful about, because also, currently one of the largest bases in the world is in Iraq, and that's how the United States, it wasn't Israel, 99% of the drones that were shot down going into Israel were by the United States. They were shot down because it's from the largest base. So we have to keep in mind that Russia and China are not going to be happy with having another base for the United States in Iran. They will somehow get involved. And so we need to kind of think about this. Why are we putting ourselves at risk, putting our people around the world at risk, putting our military in different bases around the world at risk for a racist government that wants to ethnically cleanse a people? So really the only Shia-Sunni issue is because that's what Israel and the United States government is trying to push, that this is really a Sunni-Shia issue, because the Gulf states, mind you, it's only their leaders, not their people, are also don't like Iran. It has more to do with oil and who's in control and all of these types of things. But mainly it's because they want to find a way to demolish Iran.
It seems like everything that we hear in this country is this two-state solution, and we're talking very differently.
Absolutely.
And there seems to be no majority of Palestinians or Israelis either who favor any of the solutions. There's no consensus. How will Palestinians gain any positions of leadership or power in this one-state democracy solution? What is a possible way to a peaceful solution?
Yeah, and I will answer that then, Rachel. Yeah, I think that we've been sold for a long time this really lie that somehow there is an opportunity for a two-state solution. Yet our government continues to fund Israel, and Israel continues to use our armaments to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians and to take more and more land. What two-state solution are we going to have on that image? You guys saw the map. What two-state solution? Because Israel itself is saying, well, now we have these settlements. We can't remove them. So that was the plan from the beginning, to establish these what are called facts on the ground and not to have any other opportunity. What we see, because the Palestinians are not going anywhere, even if in the diaspora, we will continue to push for Palestinian human rights. So the way we see it is that it has to be something that's coming not from the United States or Israel, it has to be a United Nations demand. And we can see clearly the vast majority of the world, it's really just the United States, which I call the Israeli-occupied White House and the Israeli-occupied Congress, that continues to push whatever Israel wants, but the vast majority of the world has seen, and I think in these last 6 months, the vast majority of Americans have also seen that. And how will Palestinians also be able to have leadership? It will only come by the United Nations and other countries, and including the United States, forcing a democratic country and forcing rights for Palestinians.
Agree, just a couple of things to follow up on. I haven't been able to, for about a decade, visualize where the two states would be when people say that. I mean, if you think about Gaza, just environmentally for a minute, are some people going to have to live on that? You know, versus like, you know, a one-state solution saying, here's this land of historic Palestine. Let's figure out how people living there can live there. You know, if you saw the maps that we went over, I didn't understand until recently through some reading that after Oslo, you know, that's when this kind of partitioning of the West Bank, dividing it into areas A, B, and C, where some people can go here and some people can go there under different roads, and the apartheid walls, the checkpoints Janan was talking about, like, that is not a viable nation for anyone. At this point, I'm cynical about the two-state solution because I never hear anyone talk about any logistics. You know, we also have to remember that the founding of the State of Israel started to divert the water from the Jordan River away from Palestinians to Israelis in the 1950s, right? So if we're going to share the road and have like two people survive there, a lot of things are going to have to be remedied. The river is going to have to flow freely. You know, far be it from me to say something that Congress has banned. We're living in a country where Congress bans slogans now, incidentally. But I don't think that I think it's worth, if someone starts saying, well, we really need a two-state solution, to just politely ask them what they mean by that. What would that look like? Where would the two states be? How would they share the water? What would the roads be like? You know, like, because I don't think most people who say that have thought that through. I think it's kind of it's a panacea that is not actually sincere.
And I think just as an addition, whenever you hear about a two-state solution, even our government say, yes, there will be Israel and a demilitarized Palestinian state. Well, what exactly does that mean? There are already 700 checkpoints run by Israel in Palestine. The Palestinians, including Hamas in Gaza, don't own a single helicopter. They don't own a single tank. They don't even own an airport. The Palestinians have no airport. What kind of a two-state solution is this? One is going to be basically a slave population, and the other ones are the overseers? That's not going to work. So otherwise, you know what? Honestly, as horrible as this situation has been for the Palestinians, I think Israel is already lost, because the entire world is suddenly seeing what the Palestinians have been experiencing for the past 76 years.
Are there any reports coming out from frontline Israeli soldiers about the atrocities being perpetrated?
One thing about the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is that they have a really strong public relations game. So on October 8th, I was at the home of Jewish relatives and we were watching CNN, and there are all these guys in IDF fatigues. So be very, for a decade, CNN vets all their coverage of Israel and Palestine with the IDF in Israel before we get to hear about it, right? So we don't fully get to hear all of what goes on. And now I completely forget the question, sorry. What was the question? I'm sorry about the soldiers. So there have been there have been 3 Israeli conscientious objectors. And this is what I was thinking a minute ago when Janan was talking about it, speaking as a Jewish mother. If you were raising your kids in a country where they're going to be, conscripted after high school and they will serve 2 to 3 years in an army that encourages the dehumanization of people, encourages the kind of rogue violence that Janan showed us pictures of. You may have been endeavoring to raise your children not to do things like that and then be told that you're a duty to the nation. I think it's very difficult. There is also an organization called Breaking the Silence, which is veterans of the IDF talking about that experience. Other than that, I would say, and you can contradict me if I'm wrong, that the IDF runs a really tight public relationship. In fact, I think that they do that almost, that is one of their military skills, is they patent a kind of truth and vend it around the world. It is not true, but they are lockstep in pursuit of that truth.
If I can just also add to that, what has been very unique about this particular situation of genocide, this is, besides the fact that the number of women and children killed within this short of time is unprecedented in history, unprecedented in the viciousness in which they have been killed. But more importantly, or just as important, I don't want to say more importantly, is the fact that this is the first conflict of any kind in which the people experiencing the genocide have been sharing it with the world in real time. And the people perpetrating the genocide have been sharing it with the world in real time. You can go on social media and you can see these Israeli soldiers rifling through Palestinian homes, sitting and eating their food, holding out the lingerie of these Palestinian women. You can see them literally killing innocent civilians. That's being shared all over, and that's exactly why we have young people in this country that are leading this charge against this genocide. Because they're not watching CNN, they're not watching ABC or NBC News, they're not reading the newspapers. They're on social media and they're seeing this happening in real time. And they're not silent about it. They are not silent about it. And so all of this is going to have a tremendous effect on Jews, I think, and also on these soldiers when they come back. So I think we're looking at a whole different time in history.
Combining the last 2 questions. I know that there are a lot of protests, but I can't stand the silence of everyone else. Why are they not motivated? What are you, the people, going to do to stop the murder? And can you tell us about the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine?
So I'll start with that. On October 8th, October 7th, we know what happened, and on October 8th, when the indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza started to happen, I called about, I want to say maybe 15, 16 representatives of organizations that I have worked with in my capacity over the years, peace and justice groups, etc., including Jewish Voice for Peace. And I said that we cannot sit silent. History did not start yesterday, and the story is not coming out. What the Palestinians, they were undergoing a slow starvation. You could go to so many different magazines, including the Washington, oh gosh, I can't think of it, what's called, Washington Report, I think. Anyhow, there were so many over the years that have had things like starvation by degrees, or ethnic cleansing, you know, in stages. And these are over the last decades talking about the Palestinians themselves. So what I did is I called together about 15 or 16 representatives of organizations, and we decided we were going to start this group called the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine. And we would be responsible for basically protesting. We would be responsible for trying to get the word out about what was happening and responding to some of these things. That group has now become 64 organizations across the state, including the Driftless in Wisconsin. And there are many, many people that are not silent. The problem is, going back to what we talked about, the silence that is being imposed, and I'm seeing it in some of the interfaith groups that I am with, where, you know, you have people that want to take a stand, and immediately you will have one or two rabbis that are in support of Netanyahu that will say, that's anti-Semitic. I will be really hurt if that is said. I will be really hurt if a statement against, you know, is put out against genocide? Really? Really? Or they'll say, well, you know, there are two sides to the story. I'm sorry, there are no two sides to genocide. There's only one side to genocide. And they'll say, well, you know, you guys need to come together and find common ground. No, I have no common ground with people that believe that the genocide of another people is okay. I have no common ground with those people. So I think what needs to happen, and I'm saying this in a Christian church, predominantly to Christians, because I think the Jews are very outspoken. Either you're with it or you're against it. I think we're seeing the same thing amongst Muslims. I think that there are a tremendous number of Christians. I can tell you the ELCA bishop for the state, a lot of these, they have been very outspoken about it. I think what needs to happen is the other churches and congregations need to basically find their spines, not allow people to use that anti-Semitism and to throw it in people's faces, and to say, you know what, as a believing Christian, it is my moral responsibility to take this stand. And if people don't like it, you know, did we ever say that, well, Jews and Nazis really need to just sit together and talk about it?
Round table.
You know, yeah, let's have a round table discussion on that. You know, slave owners and black slaves, what was wrong with them? Why didn't they just sit around and discuss this? So why is it that Palestinians are supposed to sit around with their oppressors and the people that have been ethnically cleansing them for 76 years? And well, you know, it's those Palestinians that are just not accepting Oslo Accords, which means that all of those settlements are supposed to stay there, and those, you know, that militarized Palestine will be in existence, and you have to continue to follow these rules. So basically what we're saying is, you know, y'all need to take a stand. For us, we have been marching in the streets. We ran the uninstructed campaign that we were aiming for 20,000 and brought 48,000 votes. Just to basically put a statement out there that, you know, we have the power to make you a one-term president. We don't want the orange guy, but let me tell you, we are not responsible for that. You are responsible for earning our votes. We need to really realize we live in a democracy, and we need to reclaim our democracy.
So I'll be brief because we've been sitting here a long time, but the anthropologist Margaret Mead said, you might doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world, but nothing else ever has. And so I want to tell you a story about Janesville, because you're going to go out there, like there's a group of people in Racine that every Saturday they're down in the center of town with signs saying stop the genocide. And sometimes there's 3 of them, sometimes there's 12 of them. In February, we did a Valentine's Day campaign around Palestine. We targeted some pretty militaristic, some representatives supportive of Israel. And so a few of us, some of the organizers I've met in Racine, myself, went to the office of Brian Stahl in Janesville. I'd never been to Janesville before. It was a cold, beautiful day. And there were 5 of us and a baby, and we had signs, and we went to Stell's office, which quickly locked down, so we were outside on the street, and 2 people showed up. One was a Palestinian guy who worked in the hospital in Janesville, and one was an older Christian guy named Ted, and then a journalist came from the Janesville Dispatch, I think it's called, and she stayed with us all afternoon and asked us questions, and when she talked to Ted, he said, I've just been sitting with the television since October 7th, and it tears me up, and it hurts my stomach, and this is the first time I've come out. I'm saying this because the 5 of us, cold day, and you can feel really overwhelmed by oh, how could this possibly matter? Right, it's the 5 of us, it's cold, the baby's crying, what are we doing here? It matters because the Palestinian man who worked in the hospital who felt very isolated, but very passionate about this cause, the Christian man named Ted, who talked incredibly eloquently, no media training, no activist training. Lots of people are sitting at home wringing their hands and feeling like they don't know what to say. And so you go out with the other 3 people you can get to do this with you and into the town square in Whitewater, and you feel slightly crazy and slightly silly, and people drive by and honk. And they feel slightly less alone. And we have a group of people, we start this on New Year's, because it's what I call zero entry activism, where every morning at 8, a group of people go and drop a banner off of a footbridge that is one of the big commuter arteries in Milwaukee. And that was me and 2 other people. The first day my daughter and I went out, it was freezing cold, and we hadn't figured out that a bungee cord is a good idea, so we held the banners and and my arms still hurt. Now there are 30 people who are part of that community, and they have a signal chat, and they have other events where they're talking about their feelings about this, and there's a lot of us. There's more than the news than our leaders will tell us. And I have to say that the only good thing for me since October 7th has been the incredible fluorescence of this community that Janan founded. Meeting Christians and Muslims and Palestinians and Armenians and people from, that young man from Moses who's Armenian who talked at our event, who said, I'm coming here because my grandparents, escaped genocide in Armenia. I recognize this. There's a lot of us out there. You're going to feel completely crazy. And I'm wasting my time. I'm making the sign. Who the heck do I think I am? Who you are is a democratic citizen exercising your rights and creating change. And it can feel really small. It can feel really dumb, oh my God, why? But it matters. Every single thing matters. That the 5 of us in Janesville in the cold, becoming 8 of us in Janesville in the cold, that mattered. Plus, the baby in the stroller was oh hey, this is what you do.
And just if I can just add to that, we've been indoctrinated that support for Israel is what you have to do as an American. Clearly, every poll has shown the vast majority of Americans, including nearly 100% of progressives, are saying we want an end to the genocide, we want a Palestinian state. This is not what we want to see. Nobody feels good. Normal people don't feel good seeing young children being massacred. You see families burying their children. There's one family person in Milwaukee who talked about his uncle burying 6 of his children. And as he put the pieces of their bodies in the ground. He basically apologized to each one of them and said, I apologize that I was not able to protect you, but when you meet God, tell him that it was the people that abandoned us, you know? And I don't want to be one of those people. And so it is our responsibility to do whatever we can. And as a Muslim, I just want to share a very brief kind of a saying by Prophet Muhammad, that he said that, you know, when you see injustice and oppression, stop it with your hand if you're able to. Use whatever means to stop it. If you can't do that, then continue to speak about it. Speak about it, write about it. And if you can't do that, just continue to remember it and hate it in your heart until the opportunity for you to speak about it or to stop it comes about. But you should never, ever be okay with it, because that's not what we as human beings are supposed to do. And so that's what really our call to you is that you live in an area, you can take a group of you and every week, 2 weeks, 1 month, go visit those elected officials. Let them know, you know, you represent us and this is what we want. Stand on corners. Don't be okay if somebody write op-eds in your paper. You know, get the information out. There's so many people that you know, follow our football teams and follow our basketball teams and are not in tune to you know, what's happening politically around the world. But this is affecting us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Najeeb and Dr. Buff, for your very informative and compelling presentation.
I want to commend you both and this congregation, whoever's responsible for doing these lanes here. This is, in my mind, a really thing that you're doing. And everyone that's attending here, you never know what happens in this country these days. And so you are heroes. I am the one who wrote the last question about the participation in silence. I live in Fort Atkinson. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I know what protesting is. I have a 3.5 by 5 Free Palestine flag in my front yard. I drive around Fort Atkinson. I see no other flags anywhere. And it disgusts me. Every house should have something up. We could create a movement that would just end this, put pressure on Biden and just stop it. It's like it just keeps going and going and getting worse and worse. People gotta stand up. I mean, it's hurting us.
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't have health care. I had to go to Vietnam. I got health care. I know it's like how much I appreciate it. But I have relatives that don't have it. And it's just sickening. And I was very younger to put a flag up on the lawn and, you know.
So, can I just thank you? Yes. I think I've been an organizer for a long time, but I've learned to be an organizer in the past 6 months. So what you're doing is so beautiful, and thank you. But like, the next thing is like, maybe offer a couple people a flag. Like, who you trust in town. Like, hey, you know, it's like, and that can feel really scary. Like, these conversations are really scary. Like, you know, the Jewish holidays of Passover, which any Jew who's even baked a Jewish celebrates with a big dinner. And there's so much anxiety, like, oh my God, I'm gonna go home and talk to my family. But like, so it's really hard to have these conversations. But like, have the 2 people you trust most in town. Like, hey, I have this flag. Would you like to stop? You know, are you kind of feeling uncomfortable? Like, that's the next step you take towards activity, because you're already being incredibly brave. I know in Fort Atkinson it can be like, right? But like, you know, offer somebody, like, you know, or if you don't feel comfortable with the flag, maybe you want to sign this petition, or like go down to our rep, or write a letter. You know, like, people have to be where they are, and it's a scary time in this country. There's a lot of repression that's real. So not everybody can have a flag. But I bet you have 1 or 2 friends that might, you know, and then there's 3 of you, right? Which is better.
I thank you for that suggestion. I was waiting for other people to approach me. Maybe it's my job to step up.
No, I totally feel you. Like, I feel like, you know, like, I'm just like, my friends are like, oh God, it's hurricane. You know, could you just, and you know, but like, I bet you have 2, could you just, and people will be like, oh, thank you. I've been feeling so bad about this and I didn't know what to do. And And then maybe each of you talk to 2 other could you justs, and then like you have like, wow, somebody's driving through Fort Atkinson, they're like, oh, this is a pretty anti-Zionist town, they're cool. I mean, this, like, you know, 70 people, that could be a movement. You know, and I know it feels really weird and like you're annoying people because like, as Janan said, talk football, you can talk football all afternoon and it's fine. Bring up this and people are like, oh, there it goes again. You know, that's just our culture and we all have to swim against it, I feel you. Well, that's another asset.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. Not you about it, but we're all an elderly, so I'm just gonna do this.
Thank you.
Some reassuring words. Yesterday, we had 100 to 125 people, politicians from St. Kenosha, come to the community center here in Whitewater, and they passed 2 resolutions supporting a ceasefire.
So, which, in Whitewater?
In Whitewater.
It was the Democratic Congressional 1 district, our district. It was all the Democratic leaders. And these 2 resolutions now go to the state convention that's being brought
Wow.
to
That
a
was
ceasefire.
That's
And
wonderful.
the second one was to not support Netanyahu.
Wow. In Milwaukee, we passed the resolution in the county board, but it was a fight because, you know, we have a very strong Zionist contingent. But it was a fight, but we got it through. And I know that, you know, Racine, was it Racine that
They're working
passed
on
it?
it, no, Waukesha.
Waukesha, you know, passed it. So the more that these elected officials also see that, look at, these are your you know, constituents, and this is where they stand on it, they have to listen to us.
And so was it contentious or were people like, yeah, of course?
Well, there was much discussion. One of the big words was genocide.
Right.
That's what was pulled out of the Milwaukee resolution. And it's like, okay, call it massacre, call it whatever you want, you know, let's get caught up in words.
Yeah, ours was lovely. Genocide was here.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
See, and now like you know him. So like, no, I mean, this is what organizing is. Like if you know what
And we
connect
want to
us.
know you.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is we connect
Yeah.
and we're like, we're definitely gonna go to the next meeting and say, hey, we have these people in Whitewater,
Exactly.
they're on it.
Yeah.
So Congressional District 1. And then does that mean you'll send delegates to the state?
Yes.
Oh,
That's
This
awesome.
resolution goes to the state convention of
Right.
the Democrats in June.
mhm.
And then that will be, the whole group, the whole state will be looking at these resolutions.
That's
And I
amazing.
know that the Milwaukee Dems passed it. Yeah, they passed a resolution as well, so they will also be going to the state convention, so, yeah.
Yeah, Janan has had us all join the state Democratic Party so we can go to the convention and vote for
And
these
everybody's like,
resolutions.
what? You want us to do what?
We have.
Thank you all very much for joining us today. A reminder about